I wake up at 6 o'clock every morning, whether I have something to do for the day or not. It's a habit I developed during my 43 years with Gulf Petroleum, and it has stayed with me since retirement. My home on Lakeside Avenue, a spacious two-story mansion with columns at the entrance and a large veranda, keeps a silence that sometimes is more intense than the roar of the rigs in my youth. I rise slowly from the bed, feeling the 77 years of life recoil in pain in my joints. The large bedroom that Eleanor and I once shared feels too empty now, despite the mahogany furniture and pictures on the walls. I go down to the first floor and turn on the coffee maker, one of the few modern things I'm used to. My house is nice, solid. I bought it back in the 80s when I got a job as a senior engineer. Eleanor insisted on a neighborhood closer to Olivia's prestigious school. For as long as I can remember, my wife has always been more concerned about social status than I am. I step out onto the veranda with a cup of coffee. From here I have a view of the manicured lawn and hedges, the work of Ramon, who comes twice a week. The neighboring houses are as solid and substantial as mine. We're all men here who have earned our position by hard work, not by showing off. "Good morning, Mr. Landry." Beverly Watkins, the judge's widow, waves to me as she goes for her morning jog. I nod back. It's nice to live where you're known and respected for who you are, not the make of your car or watch. After breakfast, I look through the mail. Among the bills and advertisements is a glossy envelope with ornate lettering. I open it. A dinner invitation from Olivia. It's unusual. For the past couple years, our communication had been reduced to formal calls on Christmas and Father's Day. I sigh, looking at the picture of my daughter on the mantelpiece. Olivia is in her prom dress, with a wide smile and blonde hair like her mother's. She's 38 now, but when I think of her, I often see exactly that 18-year-old girl on the cusp of adulthood. We started drifting apart when she went to college. When she returned with a degree in financial analysis, she looked at our home and lifestyle with barely concealed condescension. Eleanor was still alive then, and it pained her to see her daughter ashamed of her roots. "Daddy, you should update your closet," Olivia said, wrinkling her nose at the sight of the classic suits I wore to work. Those lapels had gone out of style 20 years ago, and then there was that Christmas when she brought her then-boyfriend, some Wall Street broker. "You know, Mr. Landry," he said to me, looking around my living room, "for the same price you could buy something more modern downtown." I held back then, remembering Eleanor and her aching heart. But even then I knew I was losing my daughter. After my wife died 10 years ago, the gulf between us only deepened. Olivia flew to the funeral, stayed 3 days and left, leaving me alone with an empty house and memories. "Dad, you need to move on," she said before she left. "Why don't you sell the house and move into that new retirement condo?" I didn't say anything at the time. How could I explain to my daughter that this house wasn't just walls and a roof, but a part of me? Every creaking floorboard, every scuff on the staircase railing is my life, my story. Instead of idle talk, I immerse myself in my work. First, I consulted young engineers in the company, then I started to help veterans of the oil industry. 3 times a week I meet with former colleagues at the local club. Some of them hold senior positions in major companies in the region. Others, like me, are retired but maintain industry ties. "Landry, you should see these young techies," says my old friend Howard Baker, former CTO and current board member of Cajun Energy, shaking his head. "They do everything on computers and they've never been on a drilling platform." I nod. We understand each other without a word. We both know the value of true professionalism, which comes only with experience, with oil-soaked work gloves, with decisions made under the pressure of circumstances, not in comfortable offices. The phone rings, snapping me out of my musings. Olivia. "Dad, did you get the invitation?" Her voice sounds excited. "Yeah, I just read it." "Are you coming?" "It's very important to me." She has that special tone in her voice that I learned to recognize when she was a teenager. It's what she says when she wants something, but she doesn't say it directly. Of course I will. Is something wrong? A pause, then a deep breath. I'm getting married, Daddy. Those words should make me happy, but instead I feel an incomprehensible anxiety. Congratulations, I say after a pause. Who is he? His name is Camden Price. He's the Director of Development at Axiom Marketing. We met at a business conference in Houston. Her voice becomes dreamy. He's special, Dad. Successful, ambitious, connected. He knows all the right people in the state. As I listen to my daughter list the virtues of her chosen one, I don't hear a word about love, respect, or shared values. Sounds impressive, I say cautiously. I'd love to meet him. That's what it's all about. Dinner on Saturday. Only... She pauses again. Dad, please wear that blue suit I gave you for Christmas. And maybe I should get a haircut before the meeting? I involuntarily touch my gray hair, which I wear a little longer than is customary for men of my age and position. Are you ashamed of me, Olivia? What? No. It's just... Camden is very detail-oriented. First impressions are important. I sigh. In my day, a man was judged on his deeds and character, not his haircut. Okay, I'll get a haircut. Thanks, Dad. See you Saturday. She disconnects, and I'm left sitting with the phone in my hand, trying to figure out why the news of my only daughter's wedding doesn't make me happy. Saturday comes faster than I'd like. I put on the suit Olivia gave me, the one that's been hanging in my closet with tags on for almost a year. The material is thin, almost weightless, and the cut is too fancy for someone my age. But I promised. Lakeview is one of the most expensive restaurants in town. I've been here a few times, mostly for corporate events. Inside, everything is gleaming with chrome and glass, and the panoramic windows overlook Lake Pien. Olivia and her fiancé are already waiting at a table. My daughter looks gorgeous in a cream dress, with her hair styled in an elaborate updo. Sitting next to her is a man in his 40s, with perfectly styled dark hair and sharp facial features. He's wearing a suit that even I, far from fashion, can identify as very expensive. Daddy. Olivia stands up and kisses me on the cheek. I'd like you to meet Camden. The man rises and extends his hand. His handshake is calculatedly firm, like a textbook of business etiquette. Mr. Landry, we meet at last. Olivia has told me so much about you. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. I've spent my life dealing with people whose decisions have affected millions of dollars in contracts and lives. I've learned to read people, and what I see in Camden Price I don't like. Nice to meet you, I reply, sitting down across from them. Dinner goes by in a strange atmosphere. Camden talks a lot, but not much of substance. He talks about his success in marketing, about meeting important people, about his plans for the future. But behind all these words, I don't see a person, just a glossy magazine cover. What exactly does your company do? I ask him when he pauses. We create an image, Mr. Landry, he says, as if he's explaining it to a child. In today's world, perception is more important than reality. Our clients pay us to look more successful, more attractive, more powerful than they really are. I notice the way Olivia looks at him with admiration, and it makes me uncomfortable. That's an interesting approach, I say neutrally. It's the opposite in engineering. It's reality that matters most because people's lives depend on it. Camden smiles indulgently. That's last-century thinking, Mr. Landry. Now even engineering companies understand the importance of brand. Take your former company, they recently rebranded, changed their logo to a more modern one. I noticed that, I nod. But it didn't make the oil any cleaner. Olivia gives me a warning glance, but Camden laughs, though his eyes remain cold. That's why I wanted to meet you. Olivia said you were an old-school man. I sense there's more than a compliment behind those words. When are you planning the wedding? I asked, changing the subject. In 3 months, Olivia answered. At the Magnolia Country Club. Camden knows the owner and we got a great discount. That's great, I say, even though my gut is screaming danger. And the honeymoon? We're thinking the Maldives, Camden enters. Or maybe a yacht tour in the Mediterranean. It all depends on our budget. He says the last phrase with a peculiar intonation, and I realize where the conversation is going. Sounds expensive, I say. Olivia fixes her hair nervously. Dad, we actually wanted to talk to you about this. You know I've never asked you for money since college. And I appreciate that, I say sincerely. But a wedding is a special occasion, and we were thinking. She looks at Camden for support. We thought you could give us a wedding gift in the form of a honeymoon payment, he finishes for her. Olivia said you're quite wealthy. His voice sounds so confident, like he already considers my money his. I feel a wave of irritation rising inside, but I hold back. I'll think about it, I say neutrally. Dad, Olivia leans toward me, lowering her voice. I know you keep a substantial amount of money in accounts. Mom always said that this money was for my future. I grow bitter at the way she's using Eleanor's memory. Your mother did want happiness for you, I agree. I guess we can discuss the financial side of things later. The rest of the evening passes in a strange tension. Camden keeps talking about himself, sometimes condescendingly interested in my career, but clearly not listening to the answers. Olivia looks at him with such adoration that I feel scared for her. When we say goodbye in the parking lot, Camden shakes my hand firmly. It was nice to meet you, Mr. Landry. I hope you'll support Olivia at this important time in her life. There's a threat hidden in his words that I understand well. Either I pay for their honeymoon or risk losing the last crumbs of my relationship with my daughter. Olivia wraps her arms around me. He's great, isn't he? She whispers. I can't bring myself to lie, so I just pat her on the back. The important thing is that you're happy. At home, I sit in my study for a long time looking at old photographs. Eleanor with little Olivia in her arms. Olivia on her first bicycle with a broken knee, but happy. Me on an oil rig, young and full of energy. Somewhere between those pictures and today, something went wrong. My daughter has turned into someone for whom outward gloss and social status are more important than anything else. And now she's about to commit her life to a man who seems to embody all the qualities I consider empty and meaningless. But what can I do? She's a grown woman who has made her choice. If I refuse to pay for their honeymoon, she'll just drift further away from me. And if I do, I'll feel complicit in what I think was a mistake. I close the photo album and sigh heavily. Maybe I'm wrong about Camden Price. Perhaps behind that facade is a decent man who will make my daughter happy. But then why does the inner voice that has never let me down scream danger? After I met Camden, life spun at an unbelievable pace. Olivia called almost every day, not to talk to me, but to tell me the latest news about the wedding preparations. I didn't feel like the father of the bride, but more like a spectator in an expensive play. Dad, we booked the Magnolia, can you believe it? In the high season, she excitedly informed me one morning. Usually there's a year-long waiting list, but Camden has connections. That's wonderful, I replied, trying to share her enthusiasm. How many guests are you planning to invite? About 250 people, Camden insisted. He says it's a great networking opportunity. I frowned, holding the phone to my ear. Networking, at my own wedding. Do you know all these people, Olivia? A short pause followed. Not all of them. A lot of them are Camden business associates and potential clients. But it's important for our future, Dad. I remembered my wedding to Eleanor. A small church, only 50 people, the closest family and friends. A modest reception at her parents' house. A dress she made with her mother's help. No networking, just love and a desire to be together. Dad, are you still here? Olivia's voice brought me back to reality. Yeah, I'm sorry. I've been thinking. What about the honeymoon? Have you decided on a place? Yes. Her voice was filled with enthusiasm again. "We've chosen the Maldives. Camden says it's the hottest trend right now. 12 days in a villa on the water with a private butler. I emailed you the calculations." I sighed. My email was used mostly for bills and newsletters, but for my daughter's sake I'd learned to check it regularly. "Okay, I'll look at it," I replied. Later, when I opened the email, I nearly choked on my coffee when I saw the total. A 5-digit number for 12 days of vacation. You could buy a nice house for that kind of money in my day. But what can you do? If it's the price of maintaining a relationship with my only daughter, I'll have to pay it. I had savings from years of work. I had always lived within my means, avoided needless spending, and invested wisely. I had money. But the very thought of paying for a luxurious vacation for a man I deeply disliked caused an inner protest. A week later, Olivia invited me to a pre-wedding cocktail party at the Magnolia Country Club. It was the first official event before the wedding, where the couple's closest friends and family were to gather. Magnolia turned out to be exactly what I envisioned, a huge colonial-style estate surrounded by immaculate lawns and old-growth trees. Everything about the place screamed money and status, from the marble columns at the entrance to the livery of the staff. As I parked my Buick among the Mercedes and BMWs, I felt out of place despite my decent suit and Omega watch, a gift from the company for 30 years of service. It was crowded and noisy inside. I noticed Olivia at once. She was standing in the center of a group of young people, talking excitedly about something. Camden stood next to her, his arm around her waist in a possessive gesture, radiant in his perfectly fitting tuxedo. "Ah, Mr. Landry." He spotted me and waved his hand without moving from his seat. I walked toward them, feeling the appraising stares of those around me. "Daddy." Olivia hugged me. "I'm glad you could make it. This is Veronica and Pierce, our friends from the yacht club." I shook hands with the young people, who looked at me with polite indifference. "Olivia told me you worked in the oil industry?" Pierce asked, clearly trying to make small talk. "Yes, 43 years at Gulf Petroleum." "How interesting," Veronica said without interest in her voice. "And my father is on the board of directors of Texoil." I nodded. "I know that company. Good technical department." "I guess," Veronica shrugged. "He's more interested in the financial side." Camden deftly turned the conversation to the upcoming charity ball, to which I realized everyone was invited except me. I took the moment to retire to the bar, where I ordered a whiskey on the rocks. "A double Glenlivet, please," said a woman's voice next to me. I turned and saw an elegant woman of about 45 with a short haircut and shrewd eyes. "Rough day?" I asked as the bartender poured her a whiskey. "More like heavy company." She nodded toward the noisy crowd. "You don't seem too thrilled with what's going on either." I smiled. "Is it noticeable?" "Only to the experienced eye." She held out her hand. "Allison Burke." "Hector Landry." I shook her hand. "Are you an acquaintance of the bride or the groom?" "Neither, to be honest." She took a sip of whiskey. "I'm here with a friend who works with Camden Price. Thought I'd keep her company. And you are?" "I'm the father of the bride." Something flashed in her eyes. Surprise? Sympathy? But it quickly disappeared. "Congratulations," she said after a pause. "A wedding is always a joyous occasion." Something in her tone made me wary. "But," Allison smiled. "There was no but. Just—" She looked around and lowered her voice. "You don't seem like someone who fits in with this company. And frankly, neither do I." "And what do you do for a living, Allison?" I asked, feeling an unexpected sympathy for this straightforward woman. "I'm a managing partner at Meridian Consulting. We do crisis management for corporations." "That sounds responsible." "It is. I have to deal with the consequences of other people's mistakes and ambitions." She took another sip. "I worked with Axiom Marketing a couple years ago. After one of their key employees left, I tensed." Axiom. That's Camden Price's company, right? Allison nodded, not noticing my interest. Yes, although he joined it after the incident. He's the director of development there now, right? As far as I know, yes, I answered carefully, not wanting to show how interested I was in this conversation. I hear he has a reputation. Controversial, Allison continued, lowering her voice even more. My friend Lauren, who works there now, has told some stories. Nothing that could be called illegal, but she stopped talking, apparently remembering she was talking to the father of the bride. I'm sorry, Mr. Landry. I shouldn't have brought it up. No, go ahead, please. I tried to keep my voice neutral. I appreciate the honesty. Allison hesitated, but then apparently decided that once she'd started, she should finish. There are rumors about him in marketing circles. They say he's not averse to appropriating other people's ideas. There was a story about a junior creative director who proposed a concept for a major client. Price initially rejected it, and a week later presented it as his own, without even changing key details. When the guy tried to defend his authorship, Price organized his dismissal, allegedly for incompetence. I listened attentively, feeling my worst fears being confirmed. And this is not an isolated incident? I asked. Unfortunately, no. Lauren had said that the atmosphere in Price's department was toxic, if I may say so. He creates competition between employees, pits them against each other. He can publicly humiliate them for the slightest mistake. And yet he's the sweetest, most professional person in front of clients and management. Allison suddenly faltered and blushed. Oh my God, what am I doing? Telling the father of the bride these things about his future son-in-law. I'm sorry, Mr. Landry. It's unforgivable of me. I shook my head. Don't apologize. I prefer to know the truth, however unpleasant it may be. She looked at me sympathetically. Perhaps it's not as bad as they say. There are always enough rumors and envy of successful people in business. I nodded, though inwardly I was sure that Allison's story only confirmed what I'd felt the first time I'd met Camden. Thank you for your candor, I said, finishing my whiskey. I think I should get back to my daughter. It was nice to meet you, Mr. Landry. She handed me her card. If you ever need crisis management counseling, in any field. I took the card and tucked it in my pocket. Something told me it might come in handy. When I returned to the main group, I found Olivia and Camden passionately discussing the details of the wedding ceremony with some burly man. The archway will be decorated with white roses and orchids imported from Thailand, Olivia said. Camden insisted that everything be perfect. And rightly so, darling, the man replied. This was a once-in-a-lifetime event, especially with the Jamesons and the Kowalskis present. It's a chance to impress the entire business world of Louisiana. I stood back, watching this conversation and feeling a growing unease. My daughter was talking about her wedding like it was a marketing campaign, not the joining of two loving hearts. When I had the chance, I took Olivia aside. Can I talk to you? Alone. She glanced at Camden, who was busy talking to some important guests, and nodded. Make it quick, Daddy. We're toasting soon. We went out onto the terrace where it was quiet and cool. The sun was already setting, coloring the sky in shades of pink and gold. What did you want to talk about? Olivia asked, glancing nervously at her watch. I took a deep breath, searching for words. Olivia, are you sure this is exactly what you want? All this pomp. 250 guests, many of whom you don't even know. She frowned. Of course I'm sure. It's going to be the event of the year. Everyone's already talking about it. I'm not talking about the wedding. I took her hand gently. I'm talking about your marriage to Camden. Do you love him? Her face tensed. What kind of question is that, Papa? Of course I love him. He's smart, successful, driven. Those are his resume, not reasons to love him, I interrupted her gently. I've heard some things about him. The way he runs his business, the way he treats his employees. Olivia pulled her hand away. Who did you hear it from? From one of those old oil man friends of yours who are jealous of today's successful businesses? No, from people who know him from work. I decided not to mention Allison directly. Olivia, I'm just worried about you. I want you to be happy. I will be happy. Her voice got higher. Camden gives me everything I've ever dreamed of. Status, connections, opportunities. We're perfect for each other. What about respect, love, support? I tried to speak softly but firmly. Marriage isn't a business contract, Olivia. Her face turned red with anger. You don't understand anything, Dad. The world has changed. It's all about love and respect and support, and it's expressed differently now. Through social status, through the opportunities we create for each other. I shook my head. I know only one thing. If a person is capable of framing colleagues, appropriating other people's ideas, publicly humiliating subordinates, then sooner or later he will do the same to his loved ones. Who told you that? Her eyes narrowed. It's all lies. Envious people always spread rumors about successful people. Olivia, no, Dad. She held up her hand to stop me. I know what's going on. You've always been against my lifestyle. You liked it when I was a little girl who admired her engineer daddy. But I've grown up. I'm on my own path. And Camden is part of that path. I felt the wall of misunderstanding I'd hoped to break down growing back between us. I just want to keep you from making a mistake, I said quietly. The only mistake I can make now is letting your old-fashionedness and envy ruin the most important day of my life. Jealousy? I was genuinely amazed. What am I jealous of? Our success, our status. She waved her hand toward the club. The fact that Camden and I are on a different level than you once were. Face it, Dad. You're stuck in the last century with your views on life and business. Her words hurt me deeper than she could have imagined. Not because they were true, but because they showed how distorted her perception had become. You're wrong, Olivia, I said calmly, but I'm not going to try to change your mind. It's your life and your choice. Exactly, she fixed her hair. And I chose Camden. If you can't be happy for me, at least don't ruin my day with your unfounded suspicions. At that moment, Camden came out onto the terrace, smiling radiantly. There you are. Everyone had already gathered for the toast. His smile faded when he noticed the tension between us. Is everything all right? Of course, darling. Olivia was instantly transformed, her smile blossoming. Daddy just wanted to discuss the details of the honeymoon. In fact, he'd agreed to pay for our trip to the Maldives. I opened my mouth to object, but saw the pleading look in my daughter's eyes. And I realized that I was faced with a choice. Either to publicly refuse her and finally break our relationship, or to agree and maintain at least the appearance of family ties. Yes, I said at last, I want to give you this gift. Camden's face broke into a smile that didn't touch his eyes. That's very generous of you, Mr. Landry. Olivia and I really appreciate your support. He put his hand on Olivia's shoulder in a possessive gesture, and they went back into the hall, leaving me alone on the terrace. I stood looking out at the sunset, feeling bitterly disappointed. My attempt to reach my daughter hadn't just failed, it seemed to push her away from me even more. But that wasn't the scariest part. What scared me was that the man she was about to marry was exactly as I had imagined him to be, a manipulative man who saw her as a stepping stone to a higher position. And yet I agreed to pay for their honeymoon, not because I approved of the marriage, but because I hoped to maintain some connection with my daughter. I hoped that sooner or later she would see the true face of her chosen one. And when she did, she would need a father who would be there for her. Back in the hall, I saw Camden making a solemn speech, holding a glass of champagne. And I want to extend a special thanks to my future father-in-law, Hector Landry, who is so generously supporting us as we begin our journey together. All eyes turned to me, and I smiled strainedly as I raised my glass. But there was an unsettling feeling growing inside me that this wedding would bring nothing but pain. Olivia's wedding day was surprisingly clear for Lake Charles, where it rained a lot this time of year. I took that as a good sign, even though deep down I didn't think anything good would come of the marriage. 3 months of preparation had only strengthened my suspicions about Camden, but for my daughter's sake, I kept my thoughts to myself. I put on my best suit, a dark blue tailored suit for important corporate meetings. The suit fit well, even though I'd lost a little weight in recent years. On the left lapel was a gold Gulf Petroleum badge, which was only given to employees who had been with the company for more than 40 years. A small detail, but for me, it is a symbol of loyalty and professionalism. Magnolia Country Club has been transformed since that pre-wedding cocktail party. The driveway was decorated with white and gold ribbons. Live statues in Greek garb stood at the main entrance, and a drone circled over the grounds, filming the arrival of guests from the air. It wasn't me who parked the car. A valet in white gloves took the keys to my Buick with a barely perceptible condescending smile. Among the luxurious foreign cars, my car, though well-maintained, looked as old-fashioned as I was. At the entrance, the master of ceremonies was greeting the guests with a clipboard, checking names against a list. "Hector Landry," I said, feeling like I was trying to sneak into a private event, not my own daughter's wedding. The young man scanned the list, frowned for a moment, then his face lit up with a fake smile. "Ah, yes, the father of the bride. Come in, sir. The ceremony will begin in 45 minutes on the center lawn." I nodded and headed inside, feeling the stares of the other guests. Most were dressed in the latest fashions, with accessories that probably cost as much as a nice car. Women in elaborate dresses with intricate hairstyles, men in perfectly fitting suits and with watches showing off their status. I knew a few of them, influential Lake Charles businessmen I'd crossed paths with for work. But for the most part, the crowd was unfamiliar to me, and I felt like an outsider at this celebration of life. I decided to find Olivia before the ceremony. She was assigned to a special room for the bride where she was getting ready to go out. As I climbed the marble staircase to the second floor, I knocked on the door indicated by the officiant. "Come in." I heard my daughter's voice. Olivia was standing in front of the mirror in a gorgeous white dress, with a stylist and makeup artist fussing around her, putting on the finishing touches. She looked dazzling, but there was tension in her eyes, which she tried to hide behind a smile. "Daddy," she turned to me, "you're here now. How do I look?" "Beautiful," I said sincerely. "You are the most beautiful bride I've ever seen." She smiled, but mechanically. "Thank you. This is Vera Wang." She ran her hand over her dress. "Camden knows her rep, and we managed to get him off the line. Always Camden and his connections, even in a moment like this." "Olivia," I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Can I talk to you?" "In private." She glanced at her team of stylists and nodded. "Give us 5 minutes, please." When they came out, I took my daughter's hands. "Are you sure this is what you want? It's not too late to change things." Her face instantly tensed up. "Daddy, we've talked about this. I love Camden. We're perfect for each other. I just want to make sure you're marrying for the right reasons. Not because of status or connections, but because you really can't imagine your life without this man." Olivia released her hands. "You never understood my ambition, Dad. To you, success is a steady job and a house in a decent neighborhood. For me, it's more than that. Camden shares my goals, understands my aspirations." I wanted to say more, but at that moment the door swung open and Camden walked into the room in his designer tuxedo. "Oh, I'm sorry." He pretended to be embarrassed. "I didn't realize you weren't alone, dear." "The groom shouldn't see the bride before the ceremony," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "It's bad luck." Camden laughed, but his eyes remained cold. "Olivia and I aren't superstitious, Hector. We're modern people who create our own luck, not wait for it from fate." He walked over to Olivia and kissed her cheek. "You look stunning, darling. I came to tell you that the Kowalskis had arrived. A whole delegation. Olivia instantly perked up. All three of them? Better yet, four. Jeffrey's little brother is here too. That's great, Olivia exclaimed. Their investment fund is just looking for new projects. I watched this exchange of remarks and felt the chasm between my daughter and me grow. For them, the wedding was not the joining of two loving hearts, but a business event with lucrative contacts. I should probably go take my seat, I said, realizing that my conversation with Olivia was interrupted and unlikely to resume. Of course, Hector, Camden smiled. I'll see you at the ceremony. As I left, I heard them discussing which of the important guests they should be sure to talk to during the reception. The ceremony was lavish and carefully choreographed, like a theatrical performance. A live string quartet played a modern rendition of the classics. 6 bridesmaids in matching champagne-colored dresses and an equal number of the groom's friends in tuxedos stood on either side of an archway decorated with exotic orchids. The guests, about 250 people, sat in white chairs arranged in perfect rows on the center lawn. I took a seat in the front row as I was supposed to be the father of the bride. The priest, a young man with a trendy beard and designer glasses, spoke about love and partnership in terms that sounded like he was describing a successful startup. Olivia and Camden exchanged vows that sounded like well-rehearsed presentations rather than promises from the heart. When the ceremony was over, guests moved into a huge banquet tent. Inside, everything glowed with luxury. Crystal chandeliers, snow-white tablecloths, exquisite floral arrangements on every table. I was seated at the head table with Camden's parents and a few of the immediate family members. Warren and Vivian Price, a prim couple in their 60s, barely graced me with a dozen sentences the entire evening. Dinner consisted of 6 courses, each served with a particular wine. I barely touched my food as I watched Olivia and Camden move from one group of guests to the next, exchanging pleasantries and posing for pictures. Everything looked as perfect as the cover of a glossy magazine, but I felt like I was the only one who could see the falseness behind that glossy facade. After the main courses, it was time for the toasts. I gave a prepared speech, trying to sound sincere and warm. I talked about how proud I was of Olivia, how I wished her happiness in her marriage. I kept my doubts and worries to myself. The guests applauded politely, but I could see that many of them were just bored, waiting to get back to business. Camden gave his toast, full of pathetic phrases about the future success and prosperity of their union. Not a word about love, just accomplishments and plans. Olivia looked at him with an admiration that broke my heart. After the formal part of the banquet, the dancing began. I sat at the table watching the newlyweds open the ball with a perfectly choreographed waltz. Then, other couples joined them and the dance floor filled with guests. I decided to go out for some fresh air. The tent, despite the air conditioning, seemed stuffy and the music too loud. The magnolias, terraces, and gardens were decorated with garlands of lights, creating a romantic atmosphere. It was quieter here, and I could catch my breath. Standing at the railing of the terrace, I heard voices coming from a gazebo nearby. One of them was Camden's. Not wanting to eavesdrop, I was about to leave, but the next phrase drew me to my seat. "I can't believe a woman as sophisticated as Olivia has such a provincial father," Camden said, contempt evident in his voice. "An ex-engineer, you know? Lives in the same house for 40 years, wears a watch he got for his seniority. An absolute dinosaur." There was laughter from several men. I froze, unable to move. "And those old-fashioned values of his," Camden continued, clearly getting a taste for them. "Real work, honest labor, reputation is more important than money. Nonsense from the last century." Fortunately, Olivia had long since outgrown that nonsense, and if there were any vestiges, I'll eradicate them quickly. Laughter again, even louder now. "Speaking of money," another voice said, "he paid for your honeymoon, didn't he?" You bet he did, Camden chuckled. The old man sitting on a pretty penny. Olivia says he's pathologically frugal, lives like a lowly clerk, but he's got over $1 million in his accounts. The honeymoon's just the beginning. I think we can convince him to invest in a few of our projects. I felt the blood rush to my face, not from shame, from anger. My worst suspicions were confirmed, but hearing my daughter discuss my finances with this man was unbearably painful. I should have walked away, but instead I took a few steps forward and found myself at the entrance to the gazebo. Camden stood surrounded by 4 men in expensive suits, whiskey glasses in hand. When he saw me, he froze, and then a fake smile appeared on his face. "Hector! What a surprise! We were just talking about you." "I heard," I said calmly. "Every word." There was an awkward silence. Camden's friends looked at each other, clearly unsure how to react. One of them muttered something about needing to find his wife and quickly retreated. The others followed suit, leaving Camden and me alone. "Listen, Hector," he began when we were alone. "It was just a conversation between friends. A few drinks, a few jokes. No need to take it seriously." "It wasn't a joke," I replied, surprised at my own calmness. "You really mean it, and apparently my daughter shares your opinion of me." "Olivia loves you," he said unconvincingly. "It's just that your outlook on life a little outdated, but that's natural for your generation." Olivia came out onto the terrace at that moment. She spotted us quickly and headed toward the gazebo. "There you are," she exclaimed with feigned joy. "I've been looking for you both. The cake cutting is coming up." She looked at our faces and her smile faded. "What's going on?" "Your husband was just telling his friends what a dinosaur I am with outdated values," I said bluntly, "and how you plan to extort money from me for your projects." Olivia turned pale but quickly pulled herself together. "Dad, I'm sure you misunderstood. Camden never said such things. Not only did he talk, but he laughed with his friends. And you, as I understand it, discussed my finances with him." She cast a quick glance at Camden, looking for support. "It was just a conversation," Camden interjected more confidently. "And yes, we were talking about possible investments. What's the big deal? Any father wants to help his daughter and her husband get back on their feet." "I've already helped you by paying for this extravagant wedding and your honeymoon," I replied. "But you seem to think of me as a cash cow." "Daddy!" Olivia exclaimed. "How can you say that? On our wedding day?" By now, our conversation had attracted the attention of the other guests. Several people came out onto the terrace and watched curiously. Camden noticed this and decided to take the offensive. "Hector," he said loudly so that everyone could hear, "I realize that it is difficult for you to accept modern realities, but please don't spoil this day with your suspicions and resentments." "They're not suspicions," I replied, feeling a lump come up in my throat. "I heard every word you said about how you plan to eradicate what's left of my values from Olivia, about how you plan to use my money." A small crowd had formed around us. I noticed some of the guests were taking pictures on their phones. Camden realized the situation was getting out of hand and decided to call it a day. "I think you should leave," he said icily. "You're in no condition to be at a gala. Maybe it's the alcohol, maybe it's your age, but you're making an inappropriate scene." "Camden's right, Dad," Olivia joined in, to my deep disappointment. "You need to calm down. Maybe it's best to go home and get some rest." I looked at my daughter, trying to find some understanding or sympathy in her eyes, but all I saw was fear, not for me, but for how this situation looked in the eyes of her new, important acquaintances. "Get out!" Camden suddenly shouted, losing the rest of his composure. "I don't want you here with your old-fashioned lectures and suspicions. We are building a new life, and you are a relic of the past." There was silence in the tent. All eyes were on us. I waited for Olivia to stand up for me, to say a word in my defense, but she just stood next to Camden, clutching his arm, and smiled strainedly, as if this were just an awkward situation to be handled with dignity. In that moment, I realized that I had finally lost my daughter. She had made her choice, and that choice was not in my favor. "Well," I said quietly, but in the silence, everyone could hear me, "I won't interfere with your celebration." I turned and walked away, keeping my back straight and my head up, even though everything was crumbling inside. As I passed the guests, I saw a mixture of curiosity, embarrassment, and pity on their faces. No one stopped me or said a word of encouragement. As I left Magnolia, I already knew that I would not let this humiliation go unpunished, not out of petty revenge, but because people like Camden should get what they deserve. And if my daughter couldn't see his true colors, I would show them to her myself, even if it was painful for both of us. I got home well past midnight. I sat in a chair in the living room without turning on the light and stared into the darkness for a long time. The humiliation was burning me inside, but it hurt even more to realize that Olivia hadn't stood up for me. Her strained smile when Camden had ordered me to get out stood before my eyes like an indictment of all my parenting failures. What had I done wrong? Where had I gone wrong in raising her? Or was it not me, but the fact that the modern world encourages such values: ostentatious success, connections, status at any cost? I took out a bottle of Glenfiddich, 20 years old, which I saved for special occasions, and poured myself a double shot. The alcohol burned my throat but brought no relief. The first impulse was simple and primitive: to call the bank in the morning and cancel all payments for the honeymoon. Let them feel what it was like to have their plans ruined. But I realized that such a move would be seen as a petty revenge on the old man, confirming everything Camden had said about me. No, we must do things differently, more deliberate. I knew the Lake Charles business community like the back of my hand. 43 years in the oil industry had not gone to waste. I had connections, reputation, credibility, and I was going to use them to show Camden Price's true colors, not just to Olivia, but to anyone who thought he was a successful businessman. I woke up this morning with a clear head and a clear plan of action. The first thing I did was call the bank and actually canceled the honeymoon payments. It wasn't an act of revenge, it was just common sense. Why pay for a luxury vacation for a man who blatantly despises you and plans to use your money? "Mr. Landry, are you sure?" The bank clerk interjected. "The amount is quite substantial and the payments have already been authorized." "Absolutely sure," I answered firmly. There had been a change in family circumstances. Next, I called my old friend Howard Baker, former CTO and current board member of Cajun Energy. "Howard, we need to meet. Tonight, if possible." "Is something wrong, Hector?" There was concern in his voice. "Yes, and it's not just me. We'll talk when we meet." We agreed to meet at noon at the country club, where veterans of the oil industry regularly gathered. I arrived early and took a table in the far corner of the terrace, which overlooked the golf course. Howard showed up at exactly the right time, a tall, trim man in his 70s, with a tanned face and shrewd eyes. We'd known each other for more than 4 decades, started Gulf Petroleum together, lived through the oil crisis of the 70s, and the transformation of the industry in the 2000 years. "You look lousy, old man," he said, sitting down across from me. "Didn't the wedding go so smoothly?" I told him briefly what had happened yesterday, not hiding either the humiliation of Camden's humiliation or the pain of my daughter's betrayal. "Bastard," Howard shook his head when I was done. "What do you plan to do?" "Show his true colors," I answered. "Not just to Olivia, but to everyone who thinks he's a successful professional. And I need your help." Howard looked at me carefully. "Hector, you're not going to do anything illegal, are you? I value our friendship, but—" "Nothing like that," I shook my head. "Just the truth. Camden Price has built his career on lying, manipulating, and using other people. I just want it to be known." Howard hesitated, drumming his fingers on the table. "Axiom marketing, you say?" he finally said. That's a funny coincidence. They're doing a big project with Cajun Energy right now. Brand redesign, new marketing strategy, digital transformation, the whole package. A multi-million-dollar contract. I felt a spark of hope ignite inside. And Camden Price is leading this project? Yes. He's the development director and leads all negotiations with our management team. He's a very persuasive young man, I must admit. Promises of a gold mine. What if I told you there was nothing behind those promises? I leaned forward. That he's misappropriating his subordinates' ideas, framing his colleagues, and creating a toxic team environment. Those are serious allegations, Hector. Do you have proof? I pulled Allison Burke's business card out of my pocket and put it on the table. Give her a call. She's a managing partner at Meridian Consulting. They handled crisis management at Axiom after several key employees left. She'll tell you about Camden Price's modus operandi. Howard took the business card and looked at it thoughtfully. Let's say you're right. What do you suggest? Organize a meeting. The board of directors of Cajun Energy and representatives of Axiom. I'll come in as a consultant on your side. Leave the rest to me. Hector, you do realize that if you're wrong, there could be serious consequences. Not just for Camden, but for you as well. I nodded. I'm fully aware of that. But I'm not wrong. Howard looked at me for a long moment, then nodded decisively. Good. I trust your judgment. Besides, he smiled slightly, if this guy is really what you say he is, Cajun will benefit by withdrawing his services. We discussed the details, and 2 days later a meeting was scheduled. In that time, I had time to contact Allison Burke, explain the situation, and get more information from her about Camden's modus operandi. She was surprised by my call, but after hearing about the public humiliation at the wedding, she agreed to help. I don't have any direct evidence of his impropriety, she said, but I can give you contacts of people who have been affected by his actions. If they're willing to talk, of course. To my surprise, several former Axiom employees were eager to share their stories about working with Camden Price. Especially valuable was the story of Jason Morgan, a former creative director whose rebranding concept for a major pharmaceutical company was appropriated by Camden. I have all the sketches, presentations, dates, Jason said. I can prove that the idea was mine and that Price first rejected it and then presented it as his own. The meeting was held at the headquarters of Cajun Energy, a modern glass and concrete building in downtown Lake Charles. Howard introduced me as an experienced strategic development consultant, which was no great exaggeration given my background in the oil industry. Camden showed up accompanied by 2 young employees carrying file folders and laptops. He was dressed in an impeccable suit and exuded the confidence of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. When he saw me, he froze for a moment, and then his face took on an expression of professional courtesy. Mr. Landry, what a surprise, he said, extending his hand. I didn't know you were consulting for Cajun Energy. I shook his hand, feeling anger boiling up inside, but outwardly remaining completely calm. Mr. Price, small world, isn't it? The meeting began with Camden's presentation on the rebranding strategy for Cajun. He spoke confidently, using buzzwords and promising a revolutionary approach to brand positioning. The board listened attentively, asking questions which Camden answered smoothly and persuasively. When the presentation was over, Howard looked at me and nodded. My exit. Impressive presentation, Mr. Price, I began, especially the concept of green progress, very relevant to an oil company in today's realities. Camden smiled, clearly flattered. Thank you, Mr. Landry. It really is a key element of our strategy. And when did you develop it? I asked innocently. It's the result of months of work by our team, he replied, tensing slightly. We've done extensive market research, competitor analysis. That's strange. I pulled a few sheets of paper out of the folder. Because I'd seen an almost identical concept presented by Jason Morgan 6 months ago, right down to the use of the same key phrases and visual metaphors. There was silence in the room. Camden turned pale but quickly pulled himself together. Jason Morgan was fired from Axiom for incompetence, he said coldly, and his ideas were rejected as being out of line with the market. Really? I looked at the board members. Then why is your current client Biopharma using a strategy developed by Morgan but presented by you as your original solution? I put some more documents on the table. A comparative analysis of Morgan's concept and Biopharma's current marketing campaign. And this is not an isolated incident, I continued. Over the past 3 years, at least 5 Axiom employees have quit or been fired after their ideas were appropriated by you. Emily Chen, Marcus Johnston, Lauren Peterson. With each name, Camden lost his composure more and more. His aides looked around in confusion, not knowing how to react. "These are absurd accusations," he finally said. "You have no proof." "I have written testimony from all the people mentioned," I replied calmly. "I also have Meridian Consulting's report on the reasons for the high turnover in your department, reasons that boil down to a toxic management style and appropriation of other people's ideas." One of the board members, an older man with a shrewd eye, leaned forward. "Mr. Landry, these allegations are very serious. Do you realize that they could have legal ramifications?" "I understand completely," I nodded, "and I'm prepared to answer for every word I say. What's more," I looked directly at Camden, "I know firsthand the methods by which Mr. Price achieves his goals. He doesn't shy away from humiliating people, manipulating and lying if it serves his interests." "This is a personal vendetta," Camden suddenly shouted, losing his temper. "This man is my wife's father, and we had a conflict at the wedding. He's trying to take revenge on me by ruining my career." "Indeed, Mr. Price is married to my daughter," I confirmed. "And yes, there was an incident at the wedding. You publicly humiliated me and ordered me out. But if it were just that, I wouldn't jeopardize the reputation of a company I've worked for over 40 years and people I respect." I nodded toward Howard and the other board members. "I'm here because I feel it's my duty to warn my longtime colleagues about a man who could damage their business." Howard coughed. "I think we should take a break and discuss the situation," he said, addressing the board. "Mr. Price, we'll get back to you later." Camden tried to object, but the chairman raised his hand to stop him. "We will review all the materials provided and make a decision. For now, please leave us alone." When Camden and his assistants left, a heavy silence hung in the room. Finally, one of the directors, whom I didn't know, turned to me. "Mr. Landry, do you realize that if your accusations are not confirmed, Axiom may sue Cajun for breach of contract?" "My accusations will prove true," I replied confidently. "Call Meridian Consulting, talk to Allison Burke, contact Jason Morgan and other former Axiom employees. Do your own investigation. I'm sure you'll find a lot more than I could gather in a few days." Howard backed me up. "I've known Hector for 40 years. If he says he can back up what he says, then he can." The board of directors met for over an hour. I was asked to wait in a neighboring office. I sat there, looking out at the view of Lake Charles and thinking about how Olivia would react when she learned of my actions. Would she be angry? Will she think I betrayed her? Or would she finally see the true face of her husband? Finally, I was invited back into the conference room. Howard met me at the door and said quietly, "They believed you, Hector. Cajun is breaking the contract with Axiom." I nodded, feeling not triumph but rather sad satisfaction. This was not a victory, but a necessity I could not ignore. The chairman of the board, a gray-haired man with an authoritative face, formally informed me of the decision. "Mr. Landry, we thank you for the information you have provided. We have contacted some of the sources you mentioned and have received confirmation of your words. Cajun Energy cannot work with a company whose practices raise such serious ethical questions. The contract with Axiom Marketing will be terminated. I thanked the board and left the building feeling a strange emptiness inside. I had done what I thought was right, but it didn't bring relief. The hardest part lay ahead, facing the consequences of my actions. The wait was not long. That evening, as I sat in my office looking through old photos, the phone rang. Olivia. I took a deep breath and answered, "Daddy, what have you done?" Her voice shook with anger and tears. "Did you know that Cajun Energy broke the contract with Axiom? It was Camden's biggest project." "I know," I replied calmly. "I was at that meeting." "You... what?" She seemed speechless. "Did you do it on purpose, out of revenge?" "Not out of revenge, Olivia. Out of justice. I was just telling the truth about your husband's modus operandi, how he misappropriates ideas, how he creates a toxic atmosphere on the team." "That's a lie," she exclaimed. "Camden is a talented professional. All these people you found are just jealous of his success. And that's why their statements match? And that's why Jason Morgan has proof that Camden stole his concept." I tried to speak calmly but firmly. The Cajun board of directors wouldn't tear up a multi-million-dollar contract without a good reason. There was silence on the phone. Then I heard muffled sobs. "You ruined his career," Olivia said finally, "and our marriage. He's furious. He's screaming that I should have warned him about your oil connections, that it's my fault for what happened." I closed my eyes, feeling my heart clench. This is the true face of Camden Price. At the first sign of trouble, he blames it on his wife. "Olivia," I said softly, "don't you see? A man who really loves you would not blame you for his failures, especially if those failures are the result of his own actions." "You don't understand," she whispered. "This was his chance for a promotion. Now it's over. For a man with real talent and honest methods, one failure wouldn't be the end of a career," I pointed out. "But Camden built his success on lies and manipulation, and such structures fall apart sooner or later." "I can't talk to you right now," Olivia said after a pause. "I need to think, and to help Camden deal with this crisis." "Of course," I agreed. "But know that no matter what happens, my door is always open to you." She disconnected without saying goodbye. I put the phone down and sat in silence for a long time, thinking about what I had done. I didn't feel triumph or satisfaction, only the hope that my daughter would now see the true nature of the man she married, and the bitterness of realizing how much pain she would have to endure. The 2 weeks after the Cajun Energy incident passed in tense suspense. Olivia hadn't called and I hadn't tried to contact her, knowing she needed time to process what had happened. I learned from mutual friends that internal investigations had begun at Axiom Marketing, and Camden had been suspended. I returned to my normal life. Meetings with former colleagues, counseling young engineers, working in the garden, which always brought me comfort. But thoughts of my daughter never left me for a moment. I knew I'd made the right choice in exposing Camden's true nature, but the price of that truth was high. I might have lost Olivia for good. One evening, as I sat on the porch with a book, enjoying the cool breeze off the lake, a car pulled into the driveway, an unfamiliar dark blue sedan. A few seconds later, Olivia stepped out of it. She looked different, without her usual flawless makeup and designer clothes. Simple jeans, a t-shirt, her hair gathered in a careless bun, and her eyes were red from crying. "Hi, Daddy," she said quietly, walking up the veranda steps. "Can I come in?" I nodded silently and let her into the house. We walked into the living room where we had once spent family evenings with Eleanor, playing board games and discussing the day's events. "Tea? Coffee?" I offered, feeling awkward. We hadn't had a proper conversation in years, and I didn't know how to start now. "Water, if you can," she replied, taking a seat on the couch, "or something stronger." I poured her a glass of water and myself some whiskey. We sat in silence for a few minutes before Olivia finally spoke. "Camden got fired," she said bluntly. "Not just from the Cajun Project, from Axiom in general. After what happened, they did an internal investigation and found evidence of all the things you were talking about." I remained silent, giving her a chance to speak. "And that's not all," she continued, nervously twirling the glass in her hands. "Turns out he's in debt. Big ones. Credit cards, consumer loans, even a few loans from some shady individuals. He kept it from me. All this time." Her voice shook, and I could see she was struggling to hold back tears. All that luxury, all those connections and status things, all on loans he couldn't pay back. He was counting on the bonus from the Cajun deal to close at least some of the debts. "I'm sorry, Olivia," I said sincerely. "Despite everything that had happened, I didn't want to see my daughter suffer." "Sorry?" She looked at me with a bitter grin. "You got what you wanted, Dad. You ruined my marriage just like you promised." "I never promised to ruin your marriage," I said calmly. "I just showed you the true face of the man you married, and he ruined it with his lies, his manipulations, his dishonest ways." She lowered her eyes, recognizing the truth of my words. "Do you know what he said when he came home after he was fired?" She continued after a pause. "That it was all my fault, that I should have kept my old man in line. That if I hadn't whined about the expensive wedding and honeymoon, he wouldn't have had to go into so much debt." The tears she'd been holding back finally flowed down her cheeks. "He drank for days on end. He'd come home at midnight, reeking of some woman's perfume. And when I asked him about it, he said he was entitled to compensation for all the trouble." I clenched my fists, feeling a wave of anger rising in me. It's one thing to misappropriate someone else's ideas and screw over your co-workers, and quite another to betray and humiliate the woman you supposedly love. "Why didn't you leave him right away?" I asked, trying to make my voice sound non-judgmental. "Pride, I guess," she grinned bitterly. "I didn't want to admit that you were right, that I was wrong to reject your values and your way of life for this." She took a sip of water and continued. "But yesterday, something happened that was the final straw. He hit me. I jumped to my feet, unable to contain my outrage. He what?" "Sitting down." She gestured for me to calm down. "I'm fine. It wasn't a punch, more like a slap. We'd been arguing about money. I'd learned that he'd withdrawn the last of our joint savings from our joint account. He yelled that I was as worthless as my father and hit me." She raised her head, and in her eyes I saw not only pain, but determination. At that moment, I realized it was over. I packed the essentials and went to a friend's house, and today I decided to come to you. I sat back in my chair, trying to digest what I'd heard. My anger at Camden was mixed with relief that Olivia had finally seen his true colors, and bitterness at the humiliation she'd been put through. "You did the right thing," I said. "No one has the right to lay a hand on you." "Never." She nodded, wiping away her tears. "I've already talked to a lawyer. The divorce will be complicated because of his debts, but I want a complete breakup. No compromises." "That's reasonable," I agreed. "If you need help with the legal costs—" "Actually," she interrupted me, and her voice became a little different, more calculating. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about. Dad, I need help. Not just with a lawyer, but with a place to live and money for the first time. All my savings went to the damn wedding and to cover some of his debts." Something in her tone alerted me. This sudden practicality after an emotional story. This shift from vulnerability to businesslike. "Of course I'll help you, Olivia," I said gently. "You're my daughter, and I'll always be there for you in times of need." "Thank you." She smiled slightly. "I knew you wouldn't say no, especially since, well, in a way, you're the one who hastened the demise of our marriage. There it is, not just asking for help, but trying to use guilt to get more." "I don't regret what I did," I said bluntly. "Yes, I hastened the inevitable. But better the painful truth now than years of living with a man who has no respect for you or your family. Olivia tensed. I'm not saying you were wrong, Dad. It's just, I really need your support right now, and not just morally. How much? I asked her straight out. She named an amount that made me raise my eyebrows. It was too much for an emergency. For what exactly? Well, for one thing, a lawyer. A good one. Second, I want to rent an apartment downtown. This house is too far from my work. And then I need to update my closet, get my confidence back after everything that's happened. You realize how important it is to look successful in my field. I looked at my daughter carefully. In her eyes, I saw not remorse or gratitude, but calculation. She came to me not because she realized the value of our relationship, but because she needed financial support. And she was using our family ties as a tool to get that support, just as Camden had once planned to use me. I'll help you with a lawyer, I said after a pause. And you can live here until you get back on your feet. There's plenty of room in the house, and I'll be glad of your company. Her face changed to one of disappointment. Papa, you don't understand. I can't live here. It's so far away from everything. And besides, I need space to start a new life. You can start a new life from here, I argued. It's a good, solid house, and it's always open to you. And the money? She wouldn't budge. I need money to get back on my feet. I sighed. Olivia, I'm willing to help you with the essentials, but I won't give you a large sum of money without a specific purpose. It won't help you in the long run. It won't? Her voice has become harsh. What do you think it will do? Living in this old house like you? Wearing the same clothes for years? Saving every dime you have even though you have millions in your bank accounts? It's not about money, I said firmly. It's about values. It's about what's really important in life. And apparently, you haven't learned your lessons from this Camden thing. She stood up, clenching her fists. You and your moralizing again. I thought you'd be glad I'd finally seen Camden's true colors, that you'd be there for me in my time of need, and you're trying to control me again. I'm not controlling you, Olivia, I said calmly. I'm offering you help, a roof over your head, and support with legal expenses, but I won't fund a lifestyle that, as you've just seen, leads nowhere. It's my choice, she exclaimed. My life. Why can't you just help me without all these conditions and moral lessons? I stood up and looked her in the eye. Because I see that you came here not out of a desire to repair our relationship, but out of necessity. Not out of remorse or understanding, but out of financial concerns. And if I just give you the money, nothing will change. You'll leave again, you'll find another Camden, and you'll do it all over again. She turned away, and I realized I'd hit the mark. You're not being fair, she said quietly. I'm really sorry for the way I've treated you all these years, for not standing up for you at the wedding. I believe part of you is truly sorry, I replied, but another part is still clinging to the values that got you into this situation, the belief that external success, status, and connections are more important than honesty, integrity, and real relationships. Olivia was silent, and I could see the struggle on her face. Then she took a deep breath and looked at me with cold determination. You know what, Dad? You're right. I came to you for the money, because I knew you wouldn't say no to your own daughter, especially when it turns out you were right about my husband. Her candor surprised me, but it also made me respect her. At least she stopped pretending. I appreciate your honesty, I said, and my offer still stands. You can stay here as long as you need to. I'll help you with your lawyer, but I can't do more than that, not because I don't love you, but because it wouldn't be real help. You're so stubborn, she shook her head. You always know best what's right and what's wrong. You never compromise. Not on principle, I agreed. And that's why I've been able to live a life I'm not ashamed of, build a career I'm proud of, and raise a daughter who, despite our differences, wasn't afraid to leave the man who'd raised his hand on her. Something in my words seemed to hurt her. For a moment, something like understanding flashed in her eyes, but then she shut down again. "Okay," she said, heading for the exit. "Thank you for the moral support. I'll be fine on my own." "Olivia," I followed her. "Don't leave like that. My offer still stands. You can always come home." She stopped at the door and turned to me. "You know what the saddest part is, Dad? You really believe you're doing the right thing, that your callousness is caring, that your stubbornness is integrity. And you believe that your desire for status and external success is ambition," I replied. "That using people is networking, that the pursuit of money is self-actualization." We looked at each other, and I saw the same adamancy in her eyes that I saw in my own, the apple of the tree, as they say. "Goodbye, Daddy," she said at last. "I hope you will be happy in your principled rightness." She walked out without looking back. I heard the engine start, the crunch of gravel under her wheels as she pulled out of the driveway. And then there was silence. I went back into the living room and sat in my chair, feeling strangely empty. I'd done what I thought was right, with both Camden and Olivia. I'd shown her husband's true colors, offered to help her, but on my own terms. I didn't go against my principles, didn't agree to fund a lifestyle I considered empty and meaningless. But the price was high. I had lost my daughter for good, the only close person I had left. Was I right? Were my principles worth the price? I looked at Eleanor's picture on the mantelpiece. She was smiling her soft, understanding smile as if to say, "You did the right thing, Hector. You can't give up your values, even for the sake of those you love, especially for their sake." Outside the window, dusk was settling in. I sat in the silence of my home, the house I had built with my own hands, where I had lived for over 40 years, raised my daughter, loved my wife. A house full of memories, traditions, and values that I had not betrayed, no matter what. I felt no triumph or satisfaction at my victory over Camden. No pride in not giving in to Olivia's demands, only the quiet certainty that I'd stayed true to myself, to his principles, what I'd always believed in. Olivia was right about one thing. I am stubborn, but that stubbornness has helped me get through life with my head held high, helped me build a career I'm proud of and a reputation that's respected, helped me stand up and walk away with dignity when I was publicly humiliated at my only daughter's wedding. And if the price of that loyalty to myself is loneliness in old age, well, I'm willing to pay it. Because compromise on principle always leads to a loss of self-respect. And without it, there is no true love, no true friendship, no true life. Perhaps someday Olivia will realize that. Perhaps life will still teach her lessons that will help her see the value of what I was trying to impart to her. Or maybe it won't. It's her path, her choice. I can't walk it for her. I can only hope that somewhere in the back of her mind she remembers the values that Eleanor and I tried to instill in her, and that one day those seeds will sprout, helping her find not ostentatious success, but true happiness. In the meantime, I'll move on, gardening, counseling young engineers, seeing friends, and keep the door open in case she ever comes back. Not for money or status, but for what really matters: love, understanding, and acceptance. A real family.